It's been almost a month since the Safe Public Spaces Street Weapons Act became effective in practice in Saskatoon. The provincial law kicked in August 1st. It allows municipalities and First Nations to regulate and prohibit street weapons and certain drugs in public spaces. Last night, Regina City Council moved one step closer to adopting the act. It gives police expanded authority to confiscate things considered a weapon that are visible in public spaces. That could be knives, hypodermic needles, machetes, or bear spray, or dangerous drugs like meth or fentanyl. Police can now seize and impound these things from public spaces without necessarily laying charges. Last month, Saskatoon City Council unanimously approved a bylaw to opt into the legislation. The communities of Estevan and Moose Jaw, they've also opted in. So today, we're digging into this. We'll hear from police officers who will tell us how they think the bylaw will help. We'll hear from people who work in the legal system and people who work with those in active addiction. We also want to hear from you. Will this safe spaces legislation make a difference when it comes to safety in our province? Call 1-800-716-2221 or email bluesky@cbc.ca. So the Saskatoon Police Service actually sent a letter of support to Saskatoon City Council before their vote to get a better sense of why and what they're seeing. I spoke with Inspector Doug McNeil with SPS, and I started by asking him what he's been seeing on the streets of Saskatoon over the last couple of weeks.
On the street, we continue to see public disorder as a result of there's more displacement of residents within the city. With that public disorder, there's that combined with what we're seeing in youth crime. There's still a lot of instances where our members are attending calls where assaults are occurring, assaults with weapons. For the most part, our calls for service very much revolve around public disorder, weapons calls, and mental health.
When you say disorder, what do you mean by disorder?
Public disturbances, we're seeing them more in places, public spaces such as the downtown area, sometimes in public spaces such as shopping malls. That's been the increase that we've seen in the last 5 years. So when we referring to public spaces, it's not just street usage, but it's more where public will come together. And we're seeing calls for service increase, and our members spending more time focusing on policing efforts in those areas.
When you talk about weapons, sometimes you watch TV shows, and you think weapon, you think gun. What kind of weapons are you seeing on the street?
In large part, it's knives in the city. They're abundantly available. They're easily concealed. And a lot of the occurrences that our members investigate and regarding arrests and what we're seizing off of people, it's knives for the most part. But that's consistent right across Canada. We're not, Saskatoon isn't an exception to that. It's right across the country. And with that, in correlation with that, we also see that in regards to the injuries at the hospitals, stab wounds, people suffering from injuries from edge weapons, under the Gunshot and Stab Wound Medical Reporting Act. The hospitals are calling us quite frequently with people walking with those types of injuries.
Now, when you say, I call me naive, but I haven't had to apprehend a weapon off of someone. When you're talking about knives, is this like a giant kitchen knife situation, or are these switchblades? Like, how are they concealing them?
Well, they're easily concealed within the clothing. Edge weapons can consist anywhere between, it can be a kitchen knife, it can be more of a hunting style knife, it could be a machete. Like the variance is there. And again, it's a weapon that's abundantly available, but like as I mentioned, easily concealed within clothing. And again, the weapon that we see most often that, both injuries, reported assaults, and when dealing with people on the streets, and if there's an instance where we have to search somebody while taking them into custody, that'd be the one that we're removing off people the most.
Okay. How has it changed? I mean, you've been a police officer for more than 2 decades. How have you seen things evolve over that time?
Just the sheer number of it. Knives have always been the weapon of choice. Definitely within the last 10 years, there's been an increase in gun-related calls. And again, when I say this in Saskatoon, it's not just Saskatoon. It's consistent right across the country. Gun violence, gun calls are going up. And of course, in the last 5 years, bear spray. that is something that we're also taking off more and more people, more youth and adults. But yeah, the idea of this Safe Spaces Act, from my understanding, is the ability of seizure. That's first and foremost what tool it's going to give police officers at this time. It doesn't necessarily focus or speak to, nor do we really know what the result will be regarding fines. But for a police service, it's a tool, another tool for officers at least to be able to, if the problem that our officers are encountering with these individuals on the streets is as a result of their drug use, and those drugs are on them, and it's a means to help regulate what those individuals' actions are, those could be seized. We don't know yet what that's going to look like as far as enforcement. The main part of this particular act is the ability to seize it, both either the drugs or the weapons, and it's another tool of the officer's toolbox to help address public safety concerns. And again, more often than not, these officers are going to be in contact with these individuals as a result of a call for service. So there's someone that does have a concern regarding the actions of this individual, and it's another means for our officers to have the ability to step into the situation, have an understanding of what's going on, and then decide what the best route is to address.
Were you not?
The Safe Spaces Act will be another tool in the toolbox for the officers on our front line.
Were you not able to do that before?
Well, we can, but it's this is a means to both articulate in the officer's actions and their report, and to record what we're doing. So now with the new legislation and the new act that comes into play, comes a new administration for us to begin to prepare and to enforce this act. So we'll be able to document and record better and report back on when we're seizing drugs, the amount of drugs we're seizing, the kind of drugs that we're seizing. So that and the authority we have to do so. So did we have the authority before? We have, but the authority always led to what charges would be in relation to the CDSA, the Canadian Drug and Substances Act. But as we have been charging less and less for possession, we could now, it'll just be one more tool for us to seize without pursuing the possession charge or any further enforcement action.
Inspector Doug McNeil with the Saskatoon Police Service. So we've heard from Saskatoon, but I'd like to bring in some other perspectives. Lori Lee Davies is the acting chief of police with the Regina Police Service. As I said before, last night, Regina City Council got one step closer to adopting this act with a vote to draft a bylaw. Andrew Hitchcock is a criminal defense lawyer who previously worked for Legal Aid for 14 years. And Sarah Kozusko is a pharmacist at Queen City Wellness Pharmacy, and she works extensively with people who are in active addiction. Welcome to all of you to Blue Sky.
Thank you for having us.
Okay. You were listening to the police officer in Saskatoon. Lori Lee, I'm going to start with you, Chief Davies. Acting Chief Davies? Chief Davies. What's the appropriate?
Laura Lee is fine.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay. You're listening. What stood out to you in that conversation, and maybe what needs clarification?
For sure. So, I think a big piece for us is the bear spray aspect of it. So back in 2024, the province made amendments to the wildlife control regulations, which basically allowed police in urban centers to be able to issue a ticket for possession of bear spray or possession of bear spray that was in a defaced can. So under that legislation, I think we've laid probably about 25 charges over the course since that's been in place. When this new act came into place August 1st, those regulations were repealed. And so we don't have a provincial ticketing mechanism for bear spray currently without adoption of the Safe Public Spaces Act. And so I think for us, that is a concern. That's one of the big pieces. We just did a quick sort of calls for service weapons analysis from the start of the year. And I think we've had 94 instances where bear spray was involved. And so for us, having a mechanism outside of a criminal charge to be able to issue a ticket or to seize the bear spray lawfully is something that I think will be super helpful for us just as we go about day-to-day duties.
On the bear spray front, because I remember there was the government came up with the thing where they said they were going to fine people who were caught with bear spray. And I thought, good luck, because a lot of it is teenagers. Is that who you're still taking bear spray off the most, is young people?
I think for the most part, it is young people. And so, I can appreciate we were all young at one point that maybe you make some not great decisions in terms of having a bear spray. And so if us taking that and holding you accountable without a criminal charge, then, for me, that I think is a good alternative. So we're not criminally charging someone. We're going with the lesser sort of penalty, or we're just seizing it without issuing a ticket. Probably some language around a warning, but we are taking that bear spray out of the community. Obviously, as you know, bear spray can have a big impact on a large number of people in a short amount of time.
Is that the biggest concern for Regina Police Service versus maybe some of the things we heard from Inspector Daniels and in Saskatoon?
Yeah, I would say bear spray number one, knives, machetes number two. There is an amazing amount of machetes out in the community. Just in the last couple of weeks, we found somebody that actually had a machete concealed down their pant leg. Obviously a big concern for us. We do tend to see machete attacks happen on a semi-regular basis, and so that's never a good thing. So if we find somebody not committing an offense, but they have machete in their possession, we can take that machete out of the community. We believe we'll be increasing public safety, and we don't necessarily have to lay a criminal charge, depending on the circumstances.
Are these people, I know I didn't dwell on this with Inspector Daniels, but when I asked about the knives, are these people bleeding when you take the knives away from them? I can't imagine sticking a giant knife down the leg of my pants and not cutting myself with it.
In the instance that I just referred to about the machete down the pant leg, we did transport that person to hospital. There was some injury as a result of trying to conceal that. So, certainly that, is a concern.
Okay. Listening to Inspector Daniels, Andrew, from a defense lawyer perspective, what stood out to what he had to say from Saskatoon Police?
From the Saskatoon Police? Well, it's hard to imagine a situation in an urban setting where you could have bear spray or a machete walking around the streets and not be arrestable. I mean, there would be reasonable probable grounds to say that you're in possession of a weapon for a dangerous purpose. The definition of weapon in the law, in the federal law, in the criminal code, is largely linked to the intent of the person who possesses the item. Bear spray is different because you can buy bear spray and there's legitimate uses for it, but it's just hard to imagine a police encounter with a citizen who has bear spray that wouldn't also be a situation where they would have grounds to arrest the person and charge them. Now, it may very well be, as the chief says, that the police officers do not want to do that. They don't want to go through the process of laying a criminal charge. And when I read the legislation this morning, the main thing that I noticed is that almost everything that I can read in here is already prohibited in the criminal code or the CDSA. The main difference being that here they can actually seize and take property and seize and forfeit property to the Crown without an actual criminal conviction, which is not possible without this legislation. I struggle to recall everything that he was pointing out, but like the issue with my ears perked up when he talked about the drug issue, like the fentanyl and methamphetamine, which is included in this act. And I don't know how the police feel about the fact that, like, simple possession of those items, even though the police can still lay the charge, even though the police can still arrest, the federal crowns will, in most circumstances, not proceed with a prosecution for simple possession. And so if you're a police officer on the street, I mean, I'm not saying they do this, I'm not a police officer, but I just imagine myself in their position. Why go through the work of making an arrest, doing the paperwork, laying the charge if you know it's just going to get stayed? Maybe this is a response to that, I don't know. But as it stands right now, in my opinion, that the police have the power to do almost everything already that this act gives them the power to do under the Criminal Code and the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act.
Do you see a use for it then?
Well, I'm open-minded. Like, if there is a benefit to say a police officer is going to use discretion to give someone a ticket instead of making them go to criminal court, maybe that is the only thing. Practically speaking, though, the kind of encounters they're going to have, the people they're going to be taking things from, are they going to show up to traffic court? Are they going to pay their ticket? Are we going to end up having to enforce unpaid fines as a result? I mean, honestly, I'd want to do more thinking, but just to disclose my bias, generally speaking, I ascribe to what Cicero said, more law, less justice. And the more laws you create, the more powers you have to do things to intervene in people's lives. Ultimately, there's often unintended bad effects down the road. Laws should be as simple to understand for the average person as possible. But again, I am open-minded. I can see the potential benefit of taking these items without laying a criminal charge. Obviously, I'm concerned about how they will be used and who they will be used on. But as in most things, a lot of how well this plays out depends on the professionalism of the people that are expected to carry it out.
Okay, Sarah, you work with a lot of the activists we've heard in the news over the last few days who are concerned about this quote criminalizing addiction. What are your concerns, or what are you hearing as you learn more about this act?
So first of all, both of your points were just so well received by me, and you, Laura, you explained it so well from a harm reduction standpoint, which I really appreciate, and I'm looking at this a little bit differently. With regards to the drugs, though, if somebody had to commit a crime to get the drugs, or sell sex to get the drugs, or whatever they had to do to get their drugs, if you take it away, they have to go do it again. They're living with addiction. This isn't something that's just like, oh, I don't have drugs, I guess I won't use any drugs today. That is not the way addiction works. So if this, then what? If we're taking away the drugs, are we doing something else? Are we taking them right to harm reduction, getting them on methadone or Suboxone? No, nobody's talking about that. If we're taking away their needles, are we giving them clean supply or other ways to feed their addiction? No. Are we expecting people to just detox? We don't have enough safe spaces for people to do that, or safe spaces for people to be. So again, it feels like we're putting something in political to make it sound like we're doing something, when what we need is safe places for people to be. People that are housed generally don't carry around knives to the same way that people that are unhoused and having to sleep on the street and, maybe having to protect themselves in the middle of the night are. A lot of things could be solved at a much lower level than having to be responsive with police. I appreciate very much, though, that this might be a way of not arresting somebody and not having them go through a criminal procedure. I don't think that the drug part of it is super helpful.
I will let you respond to that, because we did hear from the pushback here ahead of council yesterday that criminalizing addiction thing we heard over and over again. You didn't even touch on the focus for you seems to be bear spray, and I get that if you adopt the act, you adopt the whole thing. But how are your officers handling dealing with drugs and substance users now, and will that change?
I don't see it changing. I mean, Sarah and I have had conversation before. We fully support harm reduction. I can't imagine instances where we're going to be taking needles off of someone just because. I mean, we understand you need clean needles. It has a big impact on the community when, that is a strong part of your overall program. So I don't see the needles or the drug part of it being something that, we utilize very often, to be honest. And I agree. I mean, addiction is a health issue. It's not a police issue. I mean, sometimes those lines blur when there's criminal activity, obviously. But giving someone who is actively in addiction a ticket probably isn't helping anything, right? In terms of ability to pay, attending court. And so I don't see very many circumstances where that happens. Currently, we have federal direction for simple possession that we don't lay charges for people who have a small amount of drugs on them that is most likely for personal use. We've had that federal direction for a number of years, and so unless there is some crazy sort of circumstances around it, we are not charging people with possession of narcotics when it's a small amount. And so I don't foresee that changing. I mean, one of the things that this year that our officers have been doing is, if they're coming across someone, we are transporting folks to the complex needs facility, which is a safe place for them to be. And then at the tail end of it, they, are able to talk to an addictions counselor or a mental health professional, try to get them housing. As opposed to previously where if someone, didn't have a place to go, they sometimes ended up in our detention, which is not good for anyone. So, I think having that option in terms of a safe place for someone to go has been a really good thing from my perspective. But I don't see the focus on drugs or needles as something that will change the way that we currently do business.
Okay, I want to go to the phones. We have Jason on the line in Regina. If you have thoughts on this today, you can give us a call, 1-800-716-2221, or email bluesky@cbc.ca. Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Well, just listening to your guests, it seems to me then with the issues that are there, what was the focus? Why did they have to bring needles to become something that someone can be arrested for when, it's usually drug users that have the needles, and it seems like the police now can arrest that person. Maybe they're frustrated. They've dealt with the same person over and over, and now they can lay a charge on them simply for just being in possession of a needle. And after hearing what they're saying, that doesn't seem to be the problem. So why the push to have needles and the drugs on there when that's not really the problem? And there's already a tool for them to arrest or lay charges if they are assaulting someone, or if someone makes a threat with someone with a needle, that's already illegal, right? That's a charge. So I don't understand what the push was to have needles and drugs be illegal now to have in possession.
Okay, thanks for that, Jason. I think that there's two things there that we can touch on. The first thing, can you touch on the law around needles? And then I want to touch on the push part that he talked about. But can you talk about the law around needles and as a weapon?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, if we get a call for service that someone is waving around a needle, threatening someone, we actually had a situation not that long ago involving a loss prevention officer. That's a criminal code charge for assault with a weapon. And so, I don't see that changing, under that circumstance. And I would just clarify that police didn't write the law.
That's where I was going to go with the
Right.
next part. Did you have any input? Did the Ministry of Justice or with the public policing, was there any reach out to RPS about input on this, or was this something that was just presented to you by the provincial government?
Right. So I know that the provincial government, sort of as the legislation was ready to be rolled out, consulted with the Saskatchewan Association of Chiefs of Police, and that happened.
And that was it. That was kind of the end of it. So there was no back and forth other than that, maybe. And I guess if you're not are you on the Chiefs of Police?
I am actually. And, I think when we saw the legislation and we said, hey, it's another tool in our toolbox, how we use it or when we use it, we don't yet know. But yeah, that conversation did happen. I would say certainly from my perspective, there wasn't a push to say, hey, we need to really ensure that we include needles and drugs in there.
If you were given the opportunity to draft this specifically for Regina, because this is municipality specific and we don't have Inspector Daniels here to speak to Saskatoon, is there anything you would have added or taken out of this act to make it more appropriate for, less overarching and more appropriate for Regina?
Yeah, I think in listening to the delegations last night at City Council, I think there are some valid points around, the fact that needles are included in this legislation. It might make people, afraid to utilize harm reduction services or, and so, I don't think that should be a consequence of the legislation. And so, as I said, for our officers, I can't imagine that we will be utilizing this legislation when it comes to hypodermic needles or for small amounts of drugs. We already have legislation, if we chose to lay a charge in that regard. And so I think that the inclusion of those items has really kind of muddied the issue in my perspective.
Andrew, how often as a defense lawyer are you dealing with people who have been charged for carrying a quote-unquote weapon, whatever that weapon may have been?
Extremely often. I mean, it's often just one of several charges, but extremely often, yeah.
Why are people carrying weapons? Why do they tell you they're carrying weapons?
For some people, if they grow up in a neighborhood where they feel like they're subject to being accosted or robbed, they carry them for protection. For some people, if they choose to be in the game, if they choose to run with gangs or deal drugs, it's other people have them. If you want to preserve yourself, you have to. If you are a drug dealer and you are trying to protect your assets, you can't call the police to come and help you. If someone rips them off you, you have to be able to protect yourself. There are several consequences to that. A certain type of person succeeds in the drug world and other people don't. If it was legal, it would be different kind of people. I would imagine a certain percentage of people are just damaged because of trauma or whatever, and they just do what they've always done. It's very rare there's a good reason. I mean, I got to confess, like I think that there are a lot of legitimate reasons that people should be allowed to carry weapons to protect themselves. I know that may not be a popular opinion, but I do believe that. But it's also true that the majority of people that I'm not saying this in a social science sense, but the majority of people that are carrying them are probably not up to any good. So there's tension. There's only trade-offs. There's no answers. Like in response to your caller, like I think everybody here agrees you don't want to push people away from getting help for their addiction. That's crazy. But at the same time, I don't mean to defend the government. I don't know why they did this. But if you just think about it philosophically, if the citizens of an area want to regulate the use of an intoxicating substance in a public space, we've done that for alcohol for decades, and nobody seems to complain about that. It would be one thing if they said you can't have the needle in your home or in your friend's home. But if you're like downtown on Scar Street, or if you're outside of a school, or if you're outside the general hospital, there's a tension between individual freedom and the right of the public to regulate public spaces.
What are your thoughts on that, Sarah, as someone who deals with people who are often without a home?
It's complicated because most people that are using drugs, or a lot of them, don't have homes. The people that do have homes typically aren't using a needle on the public street. So again, I feel like I'm always saying the same thing. If we had safe places for people to be, this wouldn't be a problem. This also brings up another concern is most of the people that I work with every day, especially the women, have been sexually assaulted, or other things are going on and they're afraid to call the police because of X, Y, or Z. Maybe they've got outstanding warrants, or maybe they've got other things going on. But if this is just one more thing that makes them afraid of the police, and, from all the officers that I know, including Chief Davies here, I've never seen where I've called the police for somebody with their permission, and after I've convinced them to do that the officers have ever done that. But people are worried about certain tools being in the toolkit that officers will do that. And just because everyone I know is legitimately a good human being and trying to keep our community safe doesn't mean that that's everybody's experience, or that all police officers are good and will know that it's an addiction and that harm reduction and health care is needed for this person, and not just try to do something as a punishment. So I think if we didn't have the needles in this legislation, we wouldn't be sitting here right now. I don't think we would have had 5 hours of delegations last night. I don't think anybody really has a huge problem with, being able to take a knife off somebody on the street or bear spray off of somebody on the street. It's what I said earlier about if you take somebody's drugs away, that does not solve their addiction. It is just criminalizing it because they're going to have to go and get more drugs, and they're going to have to go and be involved again with the drug dealers again. And a lot of that stuff is unsafe for them and for society.
I'm struck by what you said there about the tool, because one of the things the Saskatoon officer was talking about is if they respond to a call and they see somebody that has a weapon, then they have another means to remove that weapon. And that's fine. But if you're seeing a certain type of person walk down the street and they probably got a weapon, and you think that this is another way to go and have an encounter with that person, detain them, search them, ask them questions, I have a problem with that. Not only does it erode trust in the police from a citizen's point of view, it's also an affront to what we all expect as citizens of a free country. That said, that isn't in the legislation, right? That is, everything that police officers do under this legislation will still be subject to the Constitution. But there is so much that is riding on the discretion and professionalism of the individual officers on the street that are using these tools. And I do think it's a good point to say that the more tools you give them, the more opportunity there is for misuse of those tools.
That actually brings me to my next point and my next question, and I think you can respond to their points in this, is Evan Bray was still chief when we had the encampment situation. We had the encampments outside the legislature. We had the encampments outside of City Hall. Particularly when it comes to City Hall, it was unhoused, eventually shut down because of a fire, drug use, et cetera there. When encampments and these areas of, we'll call them group safety because they feel safety in numbers, pop up, what's to stop a police officer from going in and clearing it out of drugs and or weapons that maybe they hadn't before?
Yeah, so this legislation doesn't give us additional search powers. As highlighted, it's still we're still subject to the Constitution. So arbitrary detention, arbitrary search and seizure, those are still, the big overarching factors that we still need to work under those frameworks. So, if somebody has a tent in an encampment, that tent is essentially their home. So we can't just go busting in there and take their, drugs or what have you. So we still have to act within, the framework that is laid out. We don't want our officers setting bad case law. We don't want that for sure. And so, as we roll this out, once the bylaw is enacted, clearly we'll have some really good communication with our officers in terms of the expectation on the usage of this legislation. And I think there has been a lot, saying that the folks who are most subject to this legislation could be people that are houseless or facing addictions. We are also dealing with folks who are gang affiliated, who are involved in drug trafficking, and as highlighted, the need for them to carry weapons in order to maintain their business or their affiliations. As a police officer, and I would say as a member of the community, we don't want those folks carrying weapons, and so. There are also people who are doing bad things in our community who will have their weapons taken away because of this legislation. So, I don't want the conversation to only be around police sort of infringing on vulnerable folks. I believe our police service, our police officers are highly professional, and they do exercise discretion on a daily basis, and I continue to expect them to do so in a professional way that is, subject to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
If you have thoughts on this today, you can give us a call, 1-800-716-2221, or email us bluesky@cbc.ca. When you saw this rolled out, Chief Davies, did you expect there to be blowback immediately?
No, I did not. I actually was watching what happened in Saskatoon. I'm like, oh, they wrote a letter. They're adopting the bylaw. Okay, that'll be great. We took a report to our board last month to say, we would like our board to ask City Council to opt in. And so, I didn't expect the conversation. And not that the conversation has been bad. I think it's brought to light a number of valid concerns and issues. And it has sparked me to initiate some conversations with folks, in the harm reduction space for us to say, okay, let's talk this through. What does this look like on a practical basis? And so those conversations will definitely happen going forward. And I think, for our officers and definitely for myself, it just makes us a little bit more mindful of, making sure that the use of this is in line with all of our values and responsibilities and respectful of people in the community.
What are your thoughts on all of this as you learn and you have more conversations with Chief Davies and hearing from Andrew as you're kind of processing how this may be implemented?
I feel a lot more positive than I did before. And, Andrew's comments about where the Constitution is and that you can't be doing the stop and frisk. That doesn't change anything. And if Chief Davies can have the set precedent and protocol as to how this is used and laid out, then that is great. I wonder if City Council can't take some parts out of this when they put in the bylaw because of the things around the drug addiction. And it's just the wording of it, and it's the optics. And I fear a little bit that the optics were purposely put in there for political reasons to make drug use more criminalized. And I don't think that's anybody at this table's perspective or anybody that I talk to that you should be, that drug use should be criminalized. Addiction is addiction, and people need to be supported through their addiction into the recovery journey. So, yeah, I still worry a little bit about that, but I'm a lot more hopeful than I was 5 hours ago.
In response to your question, I know that City Council asked that question last night of City Administration to say, hey, could we just say, like, we want to adopt it, but we don't want, needles and drugs to be a part of it. And the opinion from City Legal was that, no, it's either an opt-in or an opt-out, or there's a section that said you can make the default length of a blade. So you could say, okay, well, this is, as it stands right now in the legislation, a 30-centimeter blade is what sort of, meets the definition of a knife in this instance. But the outcome, I guess, from City Legal was that there wasn't an ability for them to sort of pull pieces of it and have that apply to the City of Regina.
For the record,
if they could just pass their own bylaw. I mean, it seems to me that the provincial government here, and I don't know, but it seems to me that they're responding to public outrage about the fact that, it does certainly seem that the streets are getting less and less safe. There's more and more people using drugs openly on the streets than there was 20 years ago, for sure. And so they want to be seen to be doing something about it. And yet at the same time, they're respecting local democracy by letting individual municipalities and First Nations decide whether to adopt it or not. But my question would be, why couldn't the City of Regina just pass its own bylaw independent of this?
That question was also asked last night. So Saskatoon actually has a bylaw in relation to regulating the sale of bear spray. And so that was talked about last night, but that really is a bylaw that focuses on the seller of bear spray. And the opinion of City Legal was that, municipalities have jurisdiction over a number of things, including licensing and parking and that type of thing. But to have a legislation like this would be out of their sort of jurisdiction, and that they would rely on the province, to have provincial legislation of sort of this capacity, I suppose.
More like a criminal code, like a provincial criminal code versus a municipal bylaw type of situation.
Right.
Well,
so
all the
municipal
powers of the city would be outlined in provincial
Yes.
legislation, and I'm not familiar enough with what those powers are. But
Right.
like all the powers of the provincial government are outlined in Section 92 of the Constitution. All the powers of the federal government are outlined in Section 91, and the provinces basically create the municipalities. Excuse me. Theoretically, the province could just erase all of the cities with.
Do not put that in the universe. In the world we live in these days, you just never know. Okay. This has all been very, very interesting. We are coming up sort of on the end of the show. I'm wondering, when it comes to the seizure of things without potentially laying a charge, it may mean that you have less work if there's not charges laid and you're not defending people as much. But do you think it's a good thing in these cases? 30-centimeter knife is actually huge. That's a big blade. Do you think that it's a good thing in some of these cases to not lay charges? Mr.
I can
Lawyer?
certainly imagine scenarios where there would. But the scenarios that I'm imagining are probably going to result in the police doing nothing. I'm not an officer, but imagine if you're in the gang unit and you want to cultivate a source, you're not going to worry. If someone has a small amount of drugs in them, you want to build a relationship. But I'd have to think about that, because to me, my instinct is I don't like government taking people's property. And I know here we're talking about, largely people that are committing crime, but there's always unintended consequences. And part of the chief's job and her job is to be out there on the street making people safe. And I see part of my job is to making sure that people that are exercising those powers are not betraying core principles of individual freedom. Both important and both essential.
Okay, let's talk about potential solutions. If this is not the best solution, what are some solutions that you think would make streets safer in Regina? Take the opportunity to assume that people from the government may be listening. What would help all three of you do your jobs better and make our streets safer? I'll start with you, Sarah.
So we have really good studies around, what Phoenix Residential did and, what the Friendship Center has done with their homes. And I feel like every time I'm on the radio, I talk about this. But they've housed the people in the city that were using the most amount of nights in cells or detox or the hospital, and housing them and getting them, like, not just putting them in a house, but proper supportive housing with their needs being met, making sure they're getting to their doctor's appointments, making sure that they're getting the medications that they need to be getting, make sure they're getting to their court appointments. That costs the system significantly less money. There's far less crime. They were in the hospital far less. So instead of just looking for, putting laws in place like this is just being responsive. It's not being proactive at all, and it's costing us just so much more money. So follow the model that we've already seen successful in our communities, which is supportive housing for people with proper supports.
Andrew, what do you think one of the solutions may be?
That's kind of beyond the scope of a lawyer and getting into my... my opinions have evolved as I've gotten older. I mean,
they do.
I would say, and as I've had more experience, like before the opiate crisis, I was firmly in the camp of legalizing drugs. And that comes from largely a libertarian perspective. I think most of the harm that we see is a result of the black market, not the drugs themselves. Mm-hmm. I'm not so sure about that anymore. I don't have the answers. I do know that there's a tendency when it comes to the opiate crisis and drugs to scapegoat and blame the people that are selling it for all of the harms. And yes, we can have empathy, and we should, for people that are using and are addicted. But we forget that it's not just the supply, it's the demand. But in terms of how to address that, if I were a politician, one of the key things, I think the most important thing is you have to stop, if you can, working on 4-year cycles and start working on 20 and 30-year cycles. Democracy is the best form of government except for, it's the worst form of government except for all others. And one of the downsides is, if you're a politician, your primary incentive is to get reelected in the next 4 years, not to solve problems that take generations to solve. We're never going to eradicate drug use. Humans are humans. Human nature is what it is, and it's not changing. But we can probably do more good if we start thinking more long-term.
And last word to you, Chief Davies,
All
after
right.
that very thoughtful answer.
It's pressure.
I
now.
mean, what do you need from the government?
Yeah, so I agree with Sarah. I think supportive housing, more addictions treatment spaces, that to me, if we can get people on the road to recovery, that is something that's needed in the community for sure. And this isn't provincial government, but bail reform. And so the folks who are the most violent, who are causing the most harm in our community, when we arrest them, hold them accountable to keep them out of our community is definitely something that, we would lobby for and have been lobbying before. So like I said, I know that's not provincial jurisdiction, but certainly something that as a police service, I think would definitely be beneficial.
Thank you so much to all three of you and to Inspector Daniels, if he is listening, for this really thoughtful conversation. I think that we have all come to a better place of understanding of what some of the concerns are, what some of the intentions are, and who created the act in the first place, which I think makes a big difference in terms of who needs the feedback maybe the most. So thank you so much for coming in and making some time for us. And if you have thoughts on today's show, you can always call Talkback 1-800-661-7540 or email bluesky@cbc.ca. You've been listening to Lori Lee Davies. She's the acting chief of police at Regina Police Service. Andrew Hitchcock, who is a criminal defense lawyer in Regina, and Sarah Kozusko is a pharmacist at the Queen City Wellness Pharmacy.